what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and earlier this week we actually had Blizzard release the final PTR version of 9.0.5. The candidate was indeed marked as release, and typically when a candidate is, well, marked as release, that means you're probably going to see it hit live servers within the next week or so. Now, looking, I believe at the last build of beta before Shadowlands dropped, they did mark a candidate as release, then pull it off of release and put it back after making a few changes. But seeing as how like 48 hours or so have passed, and well, I mean, I don't really expect that to be the case with 9.0.5. This is not a massive content patch. There's Valor and there's, you know, like tuning for raids and things like that coming in. But what I want to focus on this video today is giving you guys a good just summary of what is happening with Warlock for AF, Destro Demo, Covenant tuning, legendaries, undocumented changes, and then look at a really interesting version of demonology, which has sort of gained a lot of value due to legendary changes, Covenant changes, and well, some undocumented changes, which once again, at this point in time, look to be going live. So let's get into that, starting off with just, I guess, the overall Warlock tuning so far. All right, so starting things off here, first of all, forgive me if this is a bit hard to navigate. I will have links to these changes and things in the video description if you want to grab them there. It took about half an hour to dig up all these changes on Wowhead and things. Some of the info is a little fragmented and not carried over to every article, but regardless, I have it all here. So number one, you see right here, Warlock Malefic Rapture returned to 9.0 value. So in the very first build of 9.0.5 PTR, they nerfed Malefic Rapture's basically damage here, the modifier, by a pretty substantial bit. Now this spawned a lot of debate on why they're doing this, and really it wasn't a good nerf. Now, I guess we're still not totally sure if Blizzard is targeting AF's single target damage or AF's like spread Rapture damage over the course of a fight, but the issue is that Malefic Rapture is basically the only source of damage you can deal as a Warlock, as an AF lock at this point. Obviously your dots deal some damage, but your dots are essentially there to buff the damage of your Rapture. They don't deal 15-18% like they used to. I think UA deals like 10, 11, 12, maybe a little more over the course of a single target fight, but Agony, Scythe, and Corruption are 6, 7, 8%. So they're sort of in an odd spot with this nerf because there's not really a whole lot you can do. If you nerf Rapture, you're not just nerfing our single target damage, you're nerfing our AoE damage, you're nerfing our Mythic Plus damage. And let's be real, our single target maybe could use a little bit of tuning, but our like AoE damage like in Mythic Plus is not, we're not meta in Mythic Plus for our damage. We're better than people think we are, I feel, but we're not in meta. So nerfing Rapture doesn't just hit single target, it hits our AoE. Blizzard sort of put themselves in an odd spot with that, but they ended up, I guess, reverting the nerf. So Malefic Rapture is the same way that it is currently on live, and through some undocumented changes here, which we'll get to in a little while, AF is actually stronger by about 100 DPS or so when this patch comes out. So moving on from the Malefic Rapture changes and then reversion here, this is the only PTR update I can find on Wowhead that has the actual current value of Demon Armor. Demon Armor has been buffed from 120% to 160%, but on live it's actually 90. So it went from 90 to 120 on PTR initially, and then they buffed it again to 160% on PTR. This is actually 220 because we're playing AF, but it is indeed 160 if you're playing Destro. So 90 to 160% for Demon Armor. I don't PvP a tremendous amount. I know people aren't exceptionally happy with our survivability in arenas. Then again, I mean, hey, Red Pally is still gonna be one-shotting everybody, but that's something in itself. So moving on from this is where like most of the actual changes lie in this large post here. So number one, Curse of Tongues now lasts 1 minute, which was 30 seconds, and lasts 20 seconds against enemy players, which was previously 12 seconds. Now, it's not shown here, but in the uncategorized spells category of, I think, a data mining patch, like last build, the Tongue-Tied ability was referenced. Tongue-Tied is a PvP ability that we saw, I think, late in beta for Affliction Warlocks. It basically put an absorption shield on a target. Whenever you apply Curse of Tongues to a target, it put an absorption shield on them whenever they cast a spell under, like, successfully under the effect of Curse of Tongues. It hasn't popped up anywhere, so I don't really know why it was put back in and not like, implemented, but it's there. And if that does end up happening at some point, it's relevant because the duration of Curse of Tongues was increased here. It'll be nice in PvE. Impending Catastrophe applies, you know, Curse of Tongues or Curse of Weakness, so it has a little bit of relevancy there. Not bad. Number 2, called Dreadstalker's attack power increased by 10%, and Dreadbite and Dreadlash damage increased by 10%. This is a bit of a buff across the board for Demonology. It's not like it's a massive DPS buff, but it's something. It's also a relatively large buff for the Demonology from the Shadows Dreadstalkers, like big dogs build in Mythic Plus, because a large portion of your damage is Dreadbite and from the Dreadlash talent. And if you're playing the Carnivorous Stalker's Conduit, it increases your damage even more whenever that ends up proccing. So this is actually a substantial, DPS increase depending what you're actually doing. Curse of Tongues once again here, a bit of tooltip update. Summon Dreadstalkers, My Tyrant, Vile Fiend, Nether Portal Demons, and Grimoire Felguard will now listen to primary pet commands. This is, I guess, a change that we missed in early data mining. It was updated later on by Blizzard. This is actually really nice because one of the big issues and I guess concerns it's been out there for a long time with Demonology is the fact that you can't really control your pets. Like if you're trying to swap targets fast with your imps, you can maybe implode them, but well, that's not really where you want to be all the time. This is a very nice change. Also, Nether Portal Demons swapping targets. It's really nice. It's a quality of life improvement for Demonology. Now, the issues in like Theater of Pain, Spires of Ascension, basically any place at this point with a portal in it of your imps despawning and not following you around need to be solved, which I don't believe they have on PTR, but hey, once again, that's a Demonology issue in itself. Covenant abilities. So Decimating Bolt, bonus damage from a target's missing health increased to 100, was 60%. There was also a small buff to Decimating Bolt's damage, I believe, the missile damage, not the actual like effect or anything. But what they're talking about with this is actually PTR here. I am a Necrolord on PTR. So what they're talking about here is, you can read the tooltip. Basically, it increases the damage of your next spell by 100%. It will increase like by 1%, 2%, 3%. It'll increase the damage of your next spell that it increases the damage of. Sort of hard to explain there, by a certain percent depending on how low the target is on health. Now previously you wouldn't see that 100% bonus damage effect jump to like 101, 102 until the target reached 60%, and then it would scale to 180 or 200%, essentially when the mob was dead. That is no longer a thing. It starts scaling basically at 99.9%. So this will be actually 100% damage buff, but if it was a little lower, 99%, it'd probably be like somewhere like 102, 103%. A small improvement to Decimating Bolt's, I guess, Necrolord relevancy for, I suppose, all 3 specs at this point. But, for the relevant spec right now, unfortunately, being Affliction, Necrolord is still a pretty, well, let's be real here, bad choice. Impending Catastrophe for Venthyr. Damage while moving towards its target has been increased by 10%, and its explosion damage increased by 15%. So, Impending Catastrophe is in an odd spot. Venthyr sort of is. Now, I made a video, I think like a few days ago, talking about like wanted Covenant changes for 9.0.5. With this being marked as release, well, I'm not getting my hopes up anymore. The issue with Catastrophe is that the good thing is it's not target capped. The bad thing is that the AoE damage to the dot is not like incredibly impressive. I'm not exactly sure where it stacks up now compared to Soul Rot, which is target capped, essentially to like 4 targets. But the big thing here is that it's just not as relevant at all as Soul Rot is when it comes to like raiding and patchwork bosses, or, I guess 2 target-esque bosses, because the main target you apply your Soul Rot to as Night Fae takes double damage from the Soul Rot, but Venthyr doesn't do anything. What I wanted with this ability was to actually have it something along the lines of Venthyr. If it hits one target, if it explodes on one target, essentially, just double the damage of the effect. It's similar to Night Fae, but it's not copying Night Fae. It's just similar, and it sort of fits the actual, I guess, theme in a sense of Venthyr, but one can dream. Either way, a decent damage buff. We'll see where it goes. As far as plus is concerned, I don't think this is going to make it good enough for rating, really, at this point at all. And also, well, the soul binds are a little behind as well. So we'll actually get to legendaries in a little bit here. Let's skip over those briefly. So once again, here are some PvP changes. Amplified Curse, cooldown reduced to 30 seconds, was 45. Casting Circle no longer causes unending resolve, stop granting its interrupt immunity. Demon Armor increased to 120. Was 90. It is 160 now. Like I said, some of these patch notes are fragmented. You can't really find them anywhere. It's a bit annoying, but it's okay. And fixed an issue where rapid contagion can be used while under the effects of crowd control abilities. That's not an issue. That's just a plus. So the Torghast changes for Warlocks. Detonating Torch has been redesigned. It increases Shadowbolt, Drain Soul, Demonic Core, and Incinerate damage by 75% per stack now, and it stacks up to 3 times. I believe this increased the radius or the crit chance of these abilities. I think it was crit chance. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it has to be crit chance because of Drain Soul being single target. Never a very good ability. We typically take it over some irrelevant like Phantasma Gain at the end of a level, but it's actually a bit nicer now, which is solid. Inferno Skewers has been redesigned as well. Increases the damage of Seed of Corruption, Implosion, and Rain of Fire by 75%. I'm pretty sure this actually increased the radius of these abilities before, which was super awkward because it didn't really make much of a difference in Torghast, but the actual damage increase of these now is actually going to be really big. Demo already crushes in Torghast, and making massive pulls and having your Implosion damage increased by, well, no, 150%, not too bad. Pact of Thickness now increases summon demons health and damage by 50%. Was only demon health. Pact of Thickness, this is basically Pact of Thickness combined with Hellfire, the one that increases your other pet damage by 50% for demonology. I guess just in general. That one is, I think it's like Hellfire Pact or something like that. That is gone. They basically merged the two. So Pact of Thickness and Hellfire, whatever it was, are the same thing now, from what I've heard. I have not confirmed it, but I heard the... Yeah, here we actually perfect. Right here, reading ahead, perfect. Hellfire Pact has been removed. So basically, bam, Pact of Thickness is now extra thick with 3 Cs. Smoking Shard Teleportation, buff, duration increase of 15. I don't even know what this does, so it's probably not very good. Bottled Shadow duration increase to 30 seconds. I don't know what this is either, but hopefully it's better than this. Visage of Lethality has been redesigned. Whenever you're stuck in melee with an auto attack, you fear all enemies for 8 seconds. So this, I'm 99.9% sure, was the Mawrat trait, the Fear Mawrat trait, and they removed that from the game. It doesn't actually show it here, but I'm pretty sure that's gone from Torghast. It was at least when they mentioned these changes, and this like replaced it tooltip wise. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens in 0.5, but that trait had been removed, and this is like your new fear trait. Or so I'm so excited for this to just pull random mobs in Torghast and everyone to pull. It's gonna be awesome. So moving on, that is basically it. So let's talk a little bit as far as like buffs and nerfs go to Covenants and tuning and like Warlock baseline stuff. Let's talk a little bit about the legendary changes, because some of these are actually, well, could have a pretty big impact on 0.5 and also looking ahead to 0.1 PTR. Talking legendaries here, actually before we get into that, we just talked about Visage of Lethality. Yeah, fear instantly kills Mawrats. That's gone now. So whenever you're struck in melee, you fear now. So basically the Mawrat trait, which is awesome, at least to me, is gone. So looking at legendary changes, this is where things start to get pretty spicy, I feel. So one of the things that I've been sort of saying on stream lately is people have been asking what legendary should I make now. And number one, like, I mean, it's up to you, right? I think Synergy is your best universal legendary, hands down, not close. It's BIS for AF, good for Destro for sure, and good for Demo. But once you're past that, it really depends on what you're doing in game. Like if you want to do PvP, make Corruption slow. If you want to do, Destro arenas, make, Chaos Bolt. You can make Cinder if you want to play Destro in general. Wilfrids if you want to like meme with Infernals or whatever, or play Demo. There's a lot of options out there. But one thing I've mentioned lately is that I have rank 3 Cinders crafted right now on my legs, but I'm not upgrading it to rank 4 because I was waiting to see if 9.0.5 brought any more legendary tuning after this. Now at this point, I don't think it's really going to, because it's marked as release, but there are some changes made to legendaries here that made me want to make some different ones. And also I want to test a few builds out, which we'll probably be looking at in a couple days video wise here with some different legendaries that could change some things. I don't want to be behind on a legendary. I don't want to not be able to make a rank 4 if something big happens here. So getting into this, rune carving powers, legendaries essentially. For Affliction, AF, Demo, and Destro. AF. Malefic Wrath. Malefic Rapture increases the damage of a Drained Soul or Shadow Bolt by 25 for 8 seconds. It's now 35 seconds, or 35% for 10 seconds. So this is bigger than it seems. Like this is more than a flat damage buff of 10%. This stacks to 3. So this essentially means this is a 10% damage increase per stack for a total of 30% more than the previous version. Malefic Wrath is actually pretty good in single target for half locks. The problem, number one, is that it's a miserable rotation. And number two, a lot of fights like Council of Blood, like Sun King Salvation, like a lot of fights this tier, it's hard to get full Drain Soul Malefic Wrath value out. Looking back to how things were in beta when we were playing Necrolords and before they destroyed that spec or that build and everything, you were really punished from messing up one of your Drain Souls being buffed by Decimating Bolt. If you fell behind, it was a complete nightmare. Decimating Bolt only affects one Drain Soul now, so there's a lot more leeway there, but it sucks. Regardless though, Malefic Wrath actually gains a lot of value with this. One, for the 30% buff here, but number two, for the 2-second duration increase that it got. Because like I said, it was tough to like squeeze all your Drain Souls in with Decimating Bolt, which this helps if we ever go back to Necrolord. But number two, that 10 seconds, the 2 seconds extra is one, more time to generate shards if you need, like, you know, refresh your wrath at a certain point in the fight and you're close to being shard starved. And number two, it's just 2 more seconds to refresh dots, to catch, you know, things dropping out of pandemic range. AF needs that. AF is so incredibly convoluted and overcomplicated now. It's not like it's hard to play, it's just you're juggling like 9 dots in a 2-target fight. Even in, which you're not really playing this, to be fair, even in a single target fight, you're juggling Agony, Corruption, Siphon, UA, Singularity, Soul Rot, Haunt, Shadow's Embrace. That's 8 or 9 things already. Like, that's off the top of my head. Like, it's insane. Rapture, Windows, Malefic Wrath, that's 10 things. Like, there's too much, you know. That's just a personal opinion, but regardless, the 2-second duration increase here is really nice and does add value to this legendary. I'm not saying it's going to be BIS or anything, but it's already pretty decent. And depending on how next tier looks and how design goes, I'm happy with this. This is actually a sort of a sleeper buff that not many people are talking about. Wrath of Consumption. The Legion ability throwback. Basically, targets to die with your Agony or Corruption on them grant you a stack of this. It was 5% increase to all your periodic damage, being dot damage. Once again, Drain Soul does count as periodic dot damage for this. This does indeed also buff Drain Soul's damage. It was 5% for 20 seconds. It's now 6% for 30 seconds. And once again, this stacks to 5. So it's not just like a 1% buff. At max stacks, it's going to be 30% versus 25 for 30 seconds and not 20. This is actually pretty big because one, hey, our dots might not hit terribly hard, but this has a lot of potential applications in Mythic Plus or on fights like Stone Legion Generals, like Sun King Salvation at times. If you get the big thing with this effect, and even in Legion, was that you wanted to pull packs. You wanted to be in a setting where mobs were dying frequently enough to push the buff to 5 stacks and then maintain that, to chain to the next pack and kill a mob, refresh, kill a mob, refresh, keep chaining, and chain that into a boss, maybe just chain it into, you know, more packs back to back to back. This duration increase here is massive. This is like a 50% duration increase. This is huge. And hey, 5% more damage. Once again, our dots don't hit incredibly hard, but a 30% increase to them maybe gets us like sort of around Legion numbers, maybe. Probably not, but it's something. And the fact that this is not played right now in Mythic Plus, I mean, probably is the reason why they're buffing this. I don't know if it necessarily will be in general, but seeing as how we're getting in the next tier, we're going to have more Soul Ash laying around. I assume there's going to be legendary upgrades in 9.1, but we should have a handful of legendaries made. And I think Wrath of Consumption can gain a lot of value on a lot of fights. It's just that looking at, let's say, early progression this tier, what do you want? You want Synergy? That's good everywhere? Yeah. Or do you want Wrath? That might have been good on one fight at one time. You know, but next tier, these kind of effects could gain a lot of value on a couple of fights. Demonology, Balespider's Burning Core. Shadow Bolt increased the damage of next Demon Bolt by 8%. Now 15, just basically doubled. For Florida math, we're gonna call it doubled. I know 16, 15, it's doubled. Stacking up to 4 times, last 20 seconds. I don't think this is a big deal, really. It lasted 15 before, and it was pretty tough to let this debuff or let this buff drop. Once you stack to the 4, you are typically casting a Shadow Bolt at least once every 15 seconds. Now, with Born of Blood being a conduit you play a lot, and just getting so backlogged on Demon Bolt procs and things at times with your Tyrant expiring, maybe you're getting Tyrant Soul, just imps expiring, dogs coming in, I can see a world where this is like, you know, a bit of an issue. The duration buff is fine. I'll take it. It's okay. Sure. The big thing here is the damage buff. So this was 32%. Now it's 60. It's huge. It's huge, dude. Like, they double the damage of this legendary effect. And I'm going to be releasing a video later on this week showing how this legendary works, interacts with demonology, and it's spicy. It's spicy. There's some synergy here. I hinted at talking about this build a little bit earlier. Don't forget, it's not just that. Don't forget that also for demonology, I guess spoilers ahead, we'll get to this in a minute here, the undocumented changes part of this from the shadows now buffs your tyrant damage. So is your tyrant damage is demon or shadow flame damage. The demon fire is shadow flame damage. So there, it's hard to put into words. That makes FTS more valuable as far as like a demonic consumption, more relevant demonology build. Let's be real here. Decon's like pretty much the choice in this row for the most part, but having that relevancy, and meaning you're playing FTS, maybe potentially single target anyways. And then looking at the buff this got, Demo could crank some single target damage. And the build I've been testing off stream has been a little spicy. Like I said, we'll get to that in a couple days, but foreshadowing ahead, big demon bolts. Grim Inquisitor's Dread Calling. Each soul shard spent a hand of cooldown increases the damage of your next call Dreadstalkers by 4%. So this is a 1% buff to the ability, or I guess the legendary, but it's for each soul shard spent. It's not just like, okay, yeah, it's a 1% buff to your Dread Bite. No, it's per shard spent. And typically you're spending 3 shards, 3 or 2 for the most part on Dreadstalkers, really just honestly to hand of cooldown, because if you cast Dreadstalkers, you're going to reset the actual debuff or buff. So each hand of cooldown you cast essentially increases it by 12% now instead of 9. And typically you squeeze in, like, depending what you're doing, you can squeeze in, I was looking at like 15-ish stacks. I think I was testing it before, and plus, give or take a little bit, that's a decent bit of extra damage too. This legendary was a bit lacking before, so it's nice to see it getting some love. It is decent with the FTS Dreadstalkers, big dogs build for Demo, but I think like Wilfred's is probably a little better for that build. And well, if not, I mean, there are some better effects out there in general, but hey, seeing it get a little bit of love is pretty nice. Implosive Potential. Implosion grants 1% haste for 12 seconds. So essentially all this is a duration increase. But the big thing with this legendary is that playing with it in beta towards the end, it wasn't even, you didn't have this part before. It was just, you get 5% haste per imp if you hit 3 or more targets. This wasn't even here. So the single target part of it is maybe a tiny bit relevant, but the big thing was, it just felt super slow, or it felt super like quick. You had the implosion buff, and then you basically had to set another implosion right up, or it was going to drop before you imploded again. This duration increase of essentially 50% is really nice. Now, you don't see this played a tremendous amount in Plus. I actually think it's pretty decent. It's just sort of narrow because Demo's not really the best spec in Plus right now. It's fine. Aft's better, I feel. But this does bring a good bit of value. In a sustained AoE setting, this legendary is so far ahead. That's pretty crazy. I wouldn't mind making this and messing with it a little bit in 0.5, but we'll see where that goes. I'm a huge fan of this duration increase. It's not EP from BFA, but well, we're getting there. Desher really didn't get a whole lot of love as far as legendaries go. Madness of Azekir's duration, which just increased from 3 seconds to, or I guess reducing the cast time. The cast time reduction on your next Chaos Bolt, the window you can squeeze it in, was increased from 3 seconds to 4 seconds. It's fine, I guess. I did feel it was like a tiny bit short when we played with it on beta, but I mean, I guess it makes eradication weaving a little better if you're gonna play that. And I guess that's a great transition. Let's talk about some undocumented changes with eradication and pets and, well, all of that. Probably the biggest changes that honestly Warlocks have gotten in 0.5. Now listen, I will admit I am not the biggest fan of eradication. I don't really like the ability. I liked it when it was a passive like ability built in. I believe we had in BFA, or sorry, Legion, better times. But now that it's actually like a talent that we have to take at times, or I guess depending on the setting, I'm just not a huge fan of the actual effect. It does lead to, I guess, a bit more like in-depth, I guess, gameplay as far as Deshor goes. And hey, at this point, Deshor can use that because it's sort of boring. But yeah, so getting into that. Look at the actual firebolt damage of my imp here. This is probably the biggest change that we see, I guess we're going to see for Warlocks in 0.5. 239, 240, 232, roughly the 240 range, give or take a bit here, barring the crit, which is double damage. We are playing Eradication. That was not with any Eradication up. Let's have him attack. Fireball. Okay. He's going to hit for about 240, give or take, right? Let's launch a Chaos Bolt. Watch for the debuff here. 232, Eradication's up. Not that one, this one. 260. Let me refresh Eradication. 267. Yeah. So, Eradication is a 10% damage increase. It is buffing your imp's damage for Destro. It's not even just your imp. This spans your Voidwalker, your Succubus, basically any pet that you actually want to use for Destro. Eradication will increase its damage by 10%. Now, you can indeed Havoc Chaos Bolts, obviously, which means that if you're playing in Mythic Plus, this will increase your Voidwalker's like minor AoE pulsing ability by 10% on 2 targets. Now, I don't necessarily think this is going to be enough to push you into Eradication or a Flashover. They both do sim sort of close, but Flashover just has, I think, a higher upside, and honestly, it's just so much nicer to play with Havoc windows, getting in more Chaos Bolts. Basically, the whole spec just feels better with Flashover, and Eradication is sort of a nightmare to play with. But it doesn't stop there. So let's get my trusty imp back out. Where's my keybind actually here for it? Here we go, perfect. So this Affliction, remember what I said earlier? Affliction gained like a 100 DPS buff in single target for, I guess, just 0.5. Yeah, they wanted to nerf it for some reason. They nerfed Rapture, and they were like, oh yeah, we made a mistake. Let's just buff it and not tell them. So once again, let's watch the imp damage here. 222. 229. He's feeling a little weak today, but it's fine. Let's throw a haunt up. 226. Hit him again. 251. Let's put up Shadow's Embrace. 252. The next one should hit here. 252. 269. Let's refresh Shadow's Embrace. 274. Let's refresh our haunt here. This might actually drop. Let's see here. 269. And the cool thing we actually saw there is that the haunt, he launched the bolt and the haunt flew past him, hit the target before it, and it still maintained the full buff. You get your pet gains the 10% damage buff from haunt, and it also gains the 9%, or I guess whatever percent you have, depending if you're playing Cold Embrace or not, from Shadow's Embrace for Warlocks. We ran numbers on this roughly, like very, very roughly in single target. It's probably going to be somewhere around like a 70 to 80 DPS increase. Rounding to 100 was a bit excessive, but still, Warlock is exactly the same as it is on live right now after the Rapture changes being reverted until this came out. Now we're about 80 DPS better. So if people are mad at us in single target right now, well, I got bad news for you. We're about 80 DPS better next week whenever the patch releases. Now the biggest, well, I guess outside of like the AF Destro changes, by the way, the Haunt Shadow's Embrace thing does not increase Dark Lair damage. The Eradication thing does not increase Infernal damage. But for Demonology, there is another change. We talked about it a few minutes ago here. From the Shadows actually increases the damage of your Tyrant. So what we're going to do here, let me actually just pop Dogs and get FTS to pop. You'll see the Tyrant damage when I pop it here. So Dreadstalkers, we can go Tyrant about now. Watch the damage of his Demon Fire with FTS up, and then watch when it drops. So about 453, give or take a little bit, of 456. It's going to drop now. Yeah. FTS is buffing the damage of your Tyrant's Demon Fire because it is Shadow Flame damage. One, this is going to alter the, I guess, the Tyrant setup of Demonology if you're playing it. And two, this is a substantial increase to the single target damage that from the Shadows, Dreadlash, Soul Conduit, this build in Mythic Plus brings. Because this build also plays the Carnivorous Stalker's Conduit that gives your Dreadstalkers a chance to like Dreadbite again. And Dreadbite will apply from the Shadows again. And if you're playing Dreadlash, it will AoE that again. And it's not just Demon Fire that this affects. This affects Hand of Gul'dan, cleave damage, Demon Bolt, single target damage. This affects Implosion, AoE damage. This is pretty substantial. And I'm not saying it's going to give it enough value to have Carnivorous Stalkers outvalue like Fel Commando or Born of Blood and pure single target. It's actually pretty close if you're playing like a more, I guess, one target focused build, because you're losing out on Vile Fiend. So that means you don't have the Vile Fiend for its damage. You also don't have it for the the health siphon your Tyrant will have if you're playing Decon. But if you're playing this build here, Mythic Plus, this build's already very good. This build's very good on Fortified Weeks. The problem was it didn't really have any tyrannical damage, but it could now. And if you play this with Wilfrids, you Tyrant basically every 1 minute, which means you're extending more dogs. I mean, there's been plenty of times you've had 4 dogs out. You're just rolling in FTS procs. This is pretty substantial. There's been no clarification from Blizzard on this, if it's intended or not. We actually tweeted it out, no response or anything. It's marked as released, boys. Let's have some fun. Now, it's hard to live up to that. Let's be real here. pet damage FTS tyrant. But the cool thing is they also added Potency conduits, a few of them, into the raid. They mentioned this is going to be a thing like week 2 of 0.5 PTR, and they've added one conduit, one like DPS conduit, Potency conduits for each spec. Huntsman Baltimore is the only boss that still has 0 conduits. I don't know why, but regardless, Sun King Salvation has had a Rolling Agony added to it. Agony, Kel'Thas, Agony. It sort of makes sense thematically. It's cool, but this is a nice conduit to have for AF. Definitely nice. Rolling Agony here. Hungering Destroyer has Ashen Remains, which is great for Destro. This is like your focus malignancy of Destro for the most part. Whatever you're Chaos Bolting or Incinerating, you're going to have Immolate rolling on 99% of the time. And when it comes to Demo, Sludge Fist, Patchwork boss, sure, why not? The fight where you can have your Tyrant's Area Pillar if you try really, really hard. Sludge Fist has Tyrant Soul, which is nice. Now these are all going to be different eye levels depending on your, I guess, difficulty. 213 heroic, 226 mythic, lesser levels for lesser, you know, content. Even though once again, Raid Finder is the hardest difficulty. This should be giving 240 eye level, but you know, yeah. Sire Nathria also has had Potency conduits added to his table, but they're not Warlock ones. They are the Covenant ones. Catastrophic Origin, Decimation, Soul Eater, and Soul Tide, which is sort of cool because, well, you really couldn't acquire these anywhere besides the world bosses, and getting them at a higher eye level, the only way to do it was through Venari. I guess at this point it still is through Venari. Let's be real here. I don't really want to roll any of these for any reason whatsoever with my conduit reroll. I want some big focus malignancies because I hate arenas. I want some Ashen Remains. I want some good conduits. So it's nice to see these here. You can get whichever one you want out of the way, and yeah, go from there. But having some potencies added to the raid is nice. I wish there were a few more. I hope next year they drop this baseline in the raid. I guess the conduit grind has sort of been a bit, I think, excessive this tier. So hopefully this is a bit of foreshadowing for 9.1's raid, whatever that ends up being. Thanks for watching, dudes. I hope this video gave y'all a good understanding of just how Warlock is going to be looking heading into 9.0.5, which I assume is probably going to be next week, next Tuesday. It's what, the 2nd this Tuesday? I guess like the 9th, something like that. I don't know. Florida math. But yeah, so typically when Blizzard marks candidates as release, it normally means that it's going to be releasing the next week unless something actually happens. Now, there's no season for arenas or Mythic Plus. It's ending. Valor is coming out for Mythic Plus this season, which is actually gonna be awesome because the achievement is account wide. So hey, if you have alts you want to gear up, level them up and get gearing them and get going. Let me know what you guys think of basically all the changes in the comment section below. I'm probably going to be making a 9.1 like Warlock feedback document. That Blizzard typically doesn't make changes that are big over the course of PTR, like new talents and things. They have in the past, but still, I think the feedback is important. But let me know what you guys think, if that's actually worthwhile, I suppose, as well, in the comment section down below. Any questions, also feel free to drop them down there. I will be sure to get back to you. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button below and hit the sub button while you're down there as well if you want to see more WoW content. Any Week Wars profiles or add-ons you can grab for free off my Twitch if you want to hang out. Also, they're in my Discord. Links to both down below. Thanks again, dudes, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.